In this video, me and Frank are going to tell you about the 3 worst mistakes that you're probably making when it comes to training and growing the upper chest. And then after we go over each mistake, I'm going to show you my personal favorite exercise for upper chest. All right, mistake number 1 is assuming that because the upper chest sits above the other 2 portions of the chest, that the upper chest somehow pulls the arm upward. In other words, because the upper chest is higher up, people just assume that it will naturally perform higher incline presses. But this isn't true, and not knowing the proper arm path to use for the upper pecs is the number 1 mistake that I see. So think about it this way. If you're doing a high incline dumbbell press like this, here's actually the arm path that the upper chest would best stretch and shorten in. In other words, from the bottom position in the motion, the upper chest would actually pull the arm horizontally, pretty much across the body toward the chin, not upward toward the ceiling. That's something that the front delts and the traps would do. In other words, when you're trying to press vertically like this, you are almost 90 degrees off of the actual path of motion that you should be taking. So in order to actually find the appropriate angle for any press, what you want to do is take your elbow and drag it right beneath your chin. That's pretty much where the upper chest is actually going to pull your arm. So the path should look something like this, which you only really need a 15 or 30 degree incline to accomplish. Now, mistake number 2 is actually the inverse of the one we just went over, which is that people tend to arch the shit out of their back on literally every press that they do to get the deep stretch. But what happens if you arch the hell out of your back on every press? Well, instead of being too vertical now, what happens is the relative angle of every press becomes way too declined. Think about it like this. If I'm pressing like this and I arch my chest, you all see how my arm ends up now lower on my chest compared to when I relax a little bit, how it ends up higher. So trying to arch on everything will not be productive for the upper chest in many, many instances. And if you're using an incline that would otherwise be appropriate for the upper chest, what arching does is it makes the angle more declined. So instead of just actually doing a true incline press, you're kind of sort of doing a flat press instead. So the solution here is basically just to find that squeeze position, and then from there, basically just put your hand in line with where the load is. So for a dumbbell press, you want your arm to be angled roughly 90 degrees from the floor when you're in that fully contracted upper chest position. And then once you're there, all you have to do is move just a little bit wider in line with these blue fibers here that represent the upper chest to get a full stretch and full contraction on it. Now, mistake number 3, the final mistake, which is heavily related to mistake number 2, is trying to use too much range of motion all the time. All right, so here's a really simple way to understand this because it's based on the anatomy. The middle in red and the lower in yellow chest stretch not only by pulling the arm back, but also by pulling the shoulder blade back. However, the upper chest, because it attaches to the collarbone, only stretches with upper arm motion. It does not stretch when the shoulder blade shifts forward and backward because it's just moving along with the scapula. So a simple takeaway from that, the middle and the lower chest, they stretch when you really squeeze your shoulder blades back. But the upper chest, if I just squeeze my shoulder blades all the way back, it does not increase in its stretch. The upper chest only increases in its stretch if I move my arm like this. So to fully stretch the upper chest, we only really need to move the arm pretty much out to the side. We don't need to move the entire shoulder blade backward like this. In other words, if you're looking at me right now and I feel my upper chest is fully stretched pretty much by the time my arm gets here, almost in line with my body, because beyond this point, what has to happen? Well, my shoulder blade has to pretty much do most of the moving. So people confuse shoulder blade motion with more stretch, when in reality, the upper chest is pretty much stretched when the arm is right out here. So using more range of motion than that and moving to a point where the shoulder blade is really, really far backward, which usually couples with the big arch, is just increasing tension and stretch on the middle and lower chest. So that's something that you would want to do for them, but not the upper chest. So instead, just relax a little bit, use a little bit of a wider path, and use less range of motion. You will automatically feel that tension shift more upward when you limit the range. And again, this is just more specific to this and less specific to this. It's not good or bad outside of that defined context. So with all those mistakes covered up, my personal favorite, and I emphasize personal favorite because it's not like there's a best or anything, exercise for the upper chest is just your typical machine fly. Now, this video that I'm showing here is me on the Prime chest fly. This is my favorite chest fly machine. Shout out to Prime, not sponsored, but shout out to them. This is a fantastic machine. And what you'll notice is that I'm using all the principles we discussed in this video. I'm not overarching my back. I'm keeping my back relatively flatter. I'm not using an excessive arch so that the angle is lowered toward my lower chest. And I'm not using an excessive amount of range of motion backward because I know that the upper arm moving pretty much parallel in line with the body is enough to fully stretch the upper chest. And in that fully contracted position, I'm basically trying to aim my arm right below my chin, which is where these upper chest fibers will shorten the most. If you know a friend who's struggling to target their upper chest, please send this video to them so that we can all juice up the upper chest. And if you want to learn more from me personally, check out the link in the description below for all my biomechanics content.